I think white people aren't as, that's not as provocative a word in the quote unquote white community. And my experience is that, it's just not an issue. But amongst black people, so anyway, so when I meet black people that I don't know very well, if I'm in the grocery store and, if someone said, praise Jesus, I'm going to pray for you. That has no, that impacts me. Some of my atheist friends would fight that tooth and nail. Well, your praying does nothing. It's blah, blah, blah. It's just talking to yourself. That's not me. That's not how I am. Like I said, I respect people's right to, and that's just not me. I'm a very polite person. So I would just say thank you so much and keep on going. But if the topic comes up, like I said, if I don't know people, and I don't have to know people extremely well, but just probably enough to know that they're not going to try to embarrass me, like in a public place. If they did, obviously I would challenge them. But, it's just not something that I want to waste my time on, with like strangers, like at the grocery store. But so I often find that, not often, but like I said, in my preliminary social interactions with most African Americans, I do not bring up that I'm atheist. I may say something like, we're not a religious family. We don't go to church. Something like that. And that seems to actually go over very well. Because a lot of people, even if they're religious, we have tons of quote unquote religious friends who don't go to church. And I think kind of our generation just doesn't go to church, isn't quite as religious, as, previous generations. But yeah, if we start to get into deeper dialogue about religion's place in society, religion's place in African American society, those pros and cons I was talking about, that's when I think that, so again, I think there's, amongst many of my friends who tend to be often very atheist or secular or just not, religion's just not very central to their lives. That's an easy conversation to have. And for the most part, I think we're all in agreement, and it's nothing that would make them insecure or threatened in any way. If I'm having that with often people maybe who aren't quite as educated, often are more religious, not as metropolitan, are not around people of other religions, secular African Americans just don't have that exposure. Everyone's kind of black and Christian or just Christian where they live. That's a much harder conversation to have. And I probably wouldn't have it. We'd both be banging our heads against the wall. And that's just not, I have lots of friends who would be up for the challenge. That's just not something I'm interested in because my goal is not to change religious people to be atheists. I love that. If they love religion and it makes them happy and it fills their life, do it. I love it. It's great. If they love it, I love it. But it's not for me. That's kind of my perspective. Because I do think that discussion about religion to some degree amongst most people, the type of discussion you're going to have is a function of education, class, exposure to people who are different than you. Even if you are Christian, but you've grown up around Jews and Hindus and Muslims and, I think the discussion around religion can be very different than if you grew up in, a rural area where, like I said, everyone, 99.9%, 100% of people are Christian and, look just like you. And yeah.
So you mentioned that you never actually really bought into Christianity. You never really believed in it. But what first prompted you to start questioning it?
What first prompted me to?
What first prompted you to start questioning Christianity and religion in general? Probably to really kind of start thinking about it a little bit more analytically. Ironically, probably my brother, who I think now actually identifies as Christian. I have a brother who's about 2 years older than me. And sometime when we were kids, I want to say maybe when I was about 7, he's very intelligent. But when I was maybe about 7 and he was about 9 or so, I would overhear him saying stuff like my mom would say, "Oh, let's get ready to go to church," or something like that. And my brother would say, "That's just a bunch of hocus pocus. That's just a bunch of people who,
really challenging as a kid, this idea and this concept of religion and the reality of it. And it really just got me thinking. And I didn't feel extremely strongly about it. Like, I didn't, rebel and say, I'm never going to church. But I thought there's something there. But again, when I was at church, it wasn't like I was hanging on every word the preacher was saying or listening intently in Sunday school. I was there to socialize and have fun, and I'm sure like most people in church, they're hoping that, that the message gets absorbed, kind of consciously as well as subconsciously. And neither happened, I think, with me. I think some people may argue otherwise, but yeah, so that's probably what first got me started thinking, really critically thinking about religion as a phenomenon.
And so what kind of questions were you asking when you first started questioning or critically analyzing religion?
What kind of question? Like, I would, probably things like, who really invented this? Like, where does this really all come from? And I don't think to this day, again, particularly with Christianity, I think something like Islam, it's much, the invention or the start of Christianity is of Islam is much more clear, because it's a much newer religion, much more well documented. But so things like that. And I never got, like I said, scientifically, a satisfactory, answer to any of my questions. This idea, the most contemporaneous, it's my understanding that there were never any, let's say, contemporaneous writings of Jesus, that the earliest writings or documentation of Jesus or his life, if there was a person named Jesus that actually lived, were at least 100 years later. So to me, that's not, valid enough. But so again, some of the questions I would ask is, where did this come from? Who benefits from me believing in this stuff? Again, I think some of my early, and I don't remember who, I don't believe it was my brother, but I do believe someone early on, I overheard, ideas about why are Black people Christian? Like, if that's not the most repressive thing to ever have happened. And so things like that just really why do we? And maybe watching Good Times, the one show where, I think JJ, painted a Black Jesus, and at first they were like, oh, this is so, but then I think some good things happened to them, so they attributed it to Black Jesus. But things that just that one episode, got me thinking, why do Black people, worship someone who doesn't look like them? And especially when I understand, again, I don't know because I haven't read the Bible very much, but why do we worship this person who doesn't look like us, especially when we're supposed to be, everything about us is supposed to be cursed in the Bible, and our hair, our lips, or I don't know, we're supposed to come from cursed people or something. I don't know if that's true. I don't know. But even if that's kind of a myth around your religion and you're still of that religion, that's crazy to me. But your typical questions of and then I think once I got to college and went to Howard, where on one hand you would think that this would be, this is a predominantly Black institution. It would be a heightened celebration of Christianity in the Black community. And I think there's a little bit of that sprinkled into Howard. But my experience at Howard, at least 92 to 97, was, and still being, my mom worked at Howard for 30 something years, and we still have lots of ties to Howard. So, we don't live far from Howard. So, we're still very connected with community. But I think my experience at Howard was professors who challenged students to think about Christianity in our communities. And I'll never forget, I had a professor who was African, Professor Nkango Ba Nkango. And it was, I think the class we were taking, it was something like U.S. history, 1492 to 1850, something like that. And in one of the classes, basically it was the last 5 minutes of class, he said something like, Christianity is probably the worst thing that's ever happened to the Black community. And